One thing to which I want to bring your attention is Unicode. How many of you use fonts like Balaram or Tamal? Okay. These fonts are based on old restrictions in technology. There were days when you just couldn't fit all the characters you wanted on the font. And so the BBT said, okay, we'll swap out this character that we don't need with that character, which we do need. And so they developed two different systems of diacritic fonts. Two different systems. And they have different programs that go with them. And some of them are like Tamal and Balaram and so on. I would recommend that you leave those fonts aside. They're old, and there's a better way to do it now, which is called Unicode. This Unicode is a universally accepted system of providing fonts with thousands and thousands and thousands of characters, Russian and Latin and Hindi and what have you. Each one has a place, a number, essentially. And so all of our diacritic marks can be accommodated within Unicode. And there are diacritic fonts. There are fonts that have all the diacritic marks that we need. Among the advantages of using these is that there's lots of them. They are compatible with the world. You don't have to be a ISKCON devotee with a Balaram, this or that. And modern web browsers and so on accommodate them. So if you write Krishna with dots under it in Unicode and your output is displayed on a browser, it'll look the way it should be. If you put it in email, it'll look the way it should be. If you load it up to Facebook, it'll look the way it should be. So Unicode is simply better, and it's the way to go. You might hold on to your old fonts for exchanging with people who give you documents with that. It prevents your text from being transmitted across to somebody with weird squigglies where you want letters to be. So Unicode is there. You can use it on Mac, you can use it on Windows, you can use it on Linux. There are different ways to do it accordingly. They're explained very briefly in the Unicode entry of the BBT style guide. One caution, not every font has every character. So if you want to do diacritics, make sure that the font you're using has all the marks you need. Not just an accent mark, but every mark you need. Some fonts do, some fonts don't. But the ones that don't will have the spaces for your diacritic mark, but they won't have the mark. So the advantage is everything's in the same place. The place may or may not be filled. So use a font that fills your space. Clear?
What is your font of choice? Your font of choice that has all of those diacritics?
I have lots of fonts that I like. Okay. There's not one or two. There are many. Since you asked though, who is it? There's an outfit there, and it's said to be connected with the CIA. What's the name of them? They're very good at producing high quality fonts. And their specialty is making them available with these languages. A lot of the fonts that come with, like Cambria and Calibri and so on, they're ready-made, ready to go.
They're ready to go.
Ready to
That's
go.
okay.
Yeah. Gosh, the name of this outfit is.
And this is especially important like during like typesetting and things like that.
No.
Unicode is important.
Everything. for Microsoft Word documents, for emails, for everything. There's also, by the way, a converter for the database. There's a little plug-in that you can plug into the database so that when you hit Control-C, your output will be in Unicode.
That's nice. See, database.
To find that, go to my website, jswami.info, and look on the right-hand side. You'll see among the sister sites, Bhaktivedanta, Unicode for Bhaktivedanta database. It's an easy plug-in, the instructions are there, and wow.
Good.
Thank you.
How can you check if the font that you're using is a Unicode font? Just to know how
They're labeled usually as being Unicode fonts, but it's not enough to use Unicode font. The Unicode font with the characters you want.
Okay.
So the way to find out if it has the characters you want is either to see like the layout of the whole font. You can either see it published, or there are programs that let you look inside and see the whole character map, or test it. Anything else about Unicode?
Diacritics? How do we type, or is there any particular program for the diacritics?
Look in BBT Style Guide, it tells you the answer to these questions. But generally speaking, it's built into most modern operating systems. Anything else on Unicode? And the old stuff should just go the way of old stuff, the way of the cassette, the way of the floppy disk, the way of typewriter, and all of that to be reserved for special occasions. Yes?
I just wondered, did you ever feel like any special attachment to any of those old fonts that you were unable to find among the, the newly available Unicode?
No, the old fonts really are very standard fonts. Balaram is a knockoff of Baskerville.
Oh, yeah.
Tamal is a knockoff of Times. So those old fonts are the most common fonts, and they're all available. But there are other fonts now that are, have different feel and different stuff. I just looked, I saw there's something called Alcuin, A-L-C-U-I-N, which if I remember was pretty. Let's see. And I'm trying to remember the name of that outfit that has all those quite good fonts. The name is escaping me.
Is there a reason why database itself is not being updated to Unicode?
Yeah, the company that makes the software is not doing the job.
This is one of the main reasons why so many devotee authors still use old fonts.
Yes.
Excuse me?
The fact that database still uses old fonts.
Yeah, but now the database will output, it uses the old fonts internally, but externally it can output into Unicode, which makes life really nice. Parenthetical elements. This is why comments can be crucial, by the way. Call me Krishnadas or call me Krishnadas. The demigods, say the demons, can never win. The demigods say the demons can never win. So your punctuation matters. But I'll have to bigger and better things. Parenthetic elements. Use commas to set off parenthetic elements. Srila Prabhupada, is this on? It's not. There we go.
Is that on?
I'm on, so that's good enough.
Oh, that's good.
The rest of you can be all right. Srila Prabhupada, unlike false renouncers, was willing to use everything for Krishna's service. The main rule on such things, oh I see, that's all. The main rule on such things is that they generally come in pairs. So you don't want to open the pear and then not close it. Krishna, of course, gave the butter to the monkeys. So as a parenthetical element, it could be in parentheses, or it could be with dashes, but the common, unobtrusive, normal, slight way of doing these things is with commas. The rishi, or sage, was in meditation. This is called an appositive for those who are interested. Tell me, my dear boy, what you learned from your teachers. Okay, that's all clear, right? Parenthetical. You could put these parenthetical elements in parentheses, because after all, they're parenthetical. Or you can use commas for a slight pause, or most dramatically, you can use dashes or something still more dramatic. Okay, we now come to restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. Very important to learn for an editor. Largely unknown to unskilled writers. They're also called defining and non-defining clauses. And you'll get the idea, I think, pretty quickly. The devotees who had been on Parikrama for 3 days became more and more enlivened.
What is that?
Now you've got a parenthetical section, or you've got a modifier about the devotees. And it's really non-restrictive. This language will be familiar for people who do computer programming and so on, or computer logic, where you're being inclusive or not inclusive. The devotees, comma, who had been on Parikrama for 3 days, comma, those commas signal that you have a non-restrictive clause. That is, the clause doesn't restrict the class of devotees. It doesn't impose a further restriction. We're still talking about all the devotees. We're just adding information about them.
And if you take out that clause,
And if you drop it out,
it still that makes sense.
you don't miss it. The devotees became more and more enlightened. In 1865, when Srila Prabhupada appeared, Calcutta was aristocratic and opulent. Of course, you wouldn't restrict 1865 anyway, but there you are. Siddha Gokul, where Haridas Thakur sat and chanted, is just near the edge of the sea. There's only one Siddha Gokul. You're not restricting it to a subset of Siddha Gokuls. You're just telling more information, so you're not restricting. The gopis, feeling separation from Krishna, waited his return. You see the pattern. I'm just adding information. They don't limit or define, they add extra information, you could drop them. You could split each sentence in two. The gopis awaited his return. They were feeling separation from Krishna. That's a non-restrictive clause. Now we come to restrictive clauses. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. The clause is restrictive. If I put commas, people who live in glass houses. Only some people live in glass houses. They're the ones who shouldn't throw stones. The devotees who were feeling tired came back early from the Parikrama. Now, if I put that in comma, within commas, it becomes non-restrictive. I'm saying all the devotees, without restriction, became tired and came back. But this way it restricts them. Only some, a restricted number of these devotees, or a subset. It's essential information. The room in which Lord Chaitanya lived in Puri is called the Gambhira. It tells you which room is a subset of all the rooms in the pool. The gopis who couldn't join the rasa dance placed Krishna within their minds. Only a subset of the gopis. I'm restricting this to particular, otherwise it's the gopis who couldn't join the rasa dance placed Krishna within their minds. So all the gopis. But this way, it's restrictive. The restrictive ones gets, the non-restrictive ones get set off with kamas, restrictive ones, no kamas. Clear? It's pretty simple. You just have to know it and do it. And most people do need it, or don't know it and don't do it. So here's the examples. I think we've already made the point. The donations, which are meant for the deity, should not be used for oneself. This way, the donations which are meant for the deity should not be used for oneself. But the rest of the donations, you can... Okay. Clear. Now, we get to that in which. That is reserved for restrictive clauses, which can be used for either restrictive or non-restrictive. So, the house, which was on the seashore, you wouldn't say the house, comma, that was on the seashore. You'd say the house, comma, which was on the seashore. But if you were being restrictive, you could say the house that was on the seashore. So that is reserved for restrictive clauses, which can be used either way. What I do as a practice, this gives a good example. You cannot ignore the rules that are meant for you. Restrictive. You cannot ignore the rules which are meant for you. Non-restrictive. So what I do, which I don't even see here, this way, it doesn't say this way. What I do is I consistently use that for restrictive, and I consistently use which for non-restrictive. I just forget, essentially, that I have a choice about what to do when I come to, there's my advice. That I have a choice to do with what to do with restrictive clause. I can use that or which. I just say, no, I don't have a choice. I'm going to use which every time for non-restrictive, and I'm going to use that every time for restrictive. Just makes my life really easy. I know that if there's a which, there's going to be a comma before it. And if there's a that, of course, there's no comma. So you don't have to do this. There's no rule that you should do it. There's nothing at all that says anything about it. It's just what I find a good lazy man solution. And then the only time I might violate it is when which I don't like the sound of which. I said that would sound better here. Okay? Nice. Now, come to the next item, essential knowledge. And forgive me that these are not all neatly arranged in slides. I would like them to be, but one day I'll do all the work. There are, you know what independent clauses are? Who doesn't know what an independent clause is? Okay. At least 3 or 4 of them. Independent clause is a clause that can stand on its own. I went to the post office and I mailed a letter. Knock out the end, you've got 2 separate sentences. They both stand on themselves. But you can't say, because I wanted to mail a letter, I went to the post office, and just split those in 2. Right? They're not independent. The first is a dependent clause. Because I wanted to mail the letter now. So they're not on equal footing. One is dependent on the other. But it rained and it poured. You could just knock out the end, put a full stop, and you've got two sentences. So those are independent clauses. Now the rule is, and here's one, okay, Krishna went to the forest and Balaram went with him. Really, that's two sentences or two independent clauses with an and. Krishna went to the forest and he took Balaram with him. Same thing, two independent clauses. Krishna went to the forest, but Balaram stayed home. Same thing. But when you get, scroll down. These don't work the same way. When Krishna went to the forest, Balaram went with him. You can't make a sentence out of this. Krishna went to the forest every day to herd his cows and took Balaram with him. Compound predicate, if you will, but it's not two independent clauses. When Krishna went to the forest and Balaram went with him, the gopis stayed home in the village. There's, again, no two sentences here. So this is all dependent on the main clause. All right, so now we know what dependent and independent clauses are. Good. We're making so much progress, I can't believe it. Now, the rule is that two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, which is the kind of conjunction that does join independent clauses. What's a coordinating conjunction? Give me one.
That links.
And, but,
however.
So,
however.
so.
And, but.
Along?
Because, no.
One more. Or, thank you very much, whoever said or. And, but, or. Those are your coordinating conjunctions. Then you have subordinating conjunctions. You have, your okay. We won't get into that. Now, in your independent, the rule is that when you have two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, you put a comma before the conjunction. And so here, and here, and here, you want a comma before your conjunction. Simple rule. You can ignore it when the sentence is really short. But that's the general, simple principle. Two independent clauses, joined by a coordinating conjunction, comma goes between. Now, what you want to watch out for is adding a comma before a clause that is not independent. Krishna declares that we must all surrender to him, and he will protect us from sinful reactions. Are these two independent clauses?
Yes.
No.
Right. Krishna declares that they must all
No,
surrender to
because
him.
if
Period.
we surrender to
He
him,
will
he will
protect
protect
us from
us
sinful
from
reactions. Period.
Really, what's being said here is it's a compound predicate. Krishna declares A and Krishna declares B. It's not that the two things going on are that he declares A and that he will do B.
The second one's different.
He's declaring A and B. I declare that when you surrender to me, so Krishna declares that we must all surrender to him, and further declares that he will protect us from sinful reactions.
So we should remove them.
If you're familiar with diagramming sentences, you can look that up someplace, diagramming sentences. Something they sometimes teach in grammar school, grade school, and it can be useful. It teaches you about sentence structure. But basically what it says is, Krishna declares, Krishna, subject, declares, verb, then the compound predicate is this and that. So you don't have two independent clauses, you've got a compound predicate. And in the middle of that, if you stick a comma, really what you're saying is these are two different independent things. Sentence 1, Krishna declares that we must all surrender to him. Sentence 2, he will protect us from sinful reactions. If you remove the comma and knock out the and, you get two separate sentences, but they're not saying what the original said. If it were two independent clauses, knock out the and, knock out the comma, and you've got two sentences that say exactly what the original sentence said. But here you're messing it up. Lord Chaitanya declared that Lord Krishna, who presents himself as the son of the king of Vraja, is worshipable, and Vrindavan Dham is equally worshipable. Again, he's declaring A, and he's declaring B. Follow? Okay, so beware of the false impression that you're dealing with independent clauses just because you see an and, or because you see a but. You have to know, you have to look at the sentence and actually know. It's not enough to say, oh, and. Subject, verb, and. Two separate, you have to know what an independent clause is and whether you're joining two of them. Sorry about that, but there's no way around it. Any questions that I can answer without? I know I'm going over that fast. We have, in Prabhupada's books, a proofreader got in there and didn't know this. And we're still trying to get rid of all those comments that don't belong. Okay. There's a number of books. I think my book list here. No, I'm giving you in my list of books, which you'll all get. I think. Among the list is a standard book of they're called handbooks actually. The Norton handbook, this handbook, that handbook. They're all basic handbooks of grammar. Almost anyone will do. I recommended one, but there are others. And they do all this stuff. What's an independent clause? What's a dependent clause? What's a preposition? What's a, and it's amazing actually, it used to be that an educated person knew all this stuff. Now schools don't bother to teach you that. They teach you, what a reliable internet site is and all that kind of stuff. But grammar has kind of gone the way of the dinosaurs.
Which handbook of grammar would you recommend?
I've recommended one in the list, you can see. But that's only the semi-arbitrary choice. You could choose another one and be on safe ground. And especially if you were dealing with the British world, you might choose a different one. In marking off participial clauses, so again you have to know what a participle is, or at least have a sense of what it is. Get your comma in the right place. He left Vrindavan and after proceeding to Bombay, went on to America. Now here, you look and say, there's a coordinated conjunction, and I put my comma before it, but that would be wrong. Really, you've got a compound predicate saying he left Vrindavan and went on to America. Compound verb, really. Compound sentence. He left Vrindavan and went on to America. You don't need a comma there. What you need the comma for is to mark off the parenthetical clause after proceeding to Bombay. So your comma goes after the end, not before it. Are you lost? You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
And these get, they become second nature after a while. All this stuff becomes second nature after a while. You just need to know the rules, sort of get them down. It's like arithmetic, you learn your tables, and then a lot of it's like that. A lot of mechanics are like that. And then, of course, since this isn't math, the exact science, sometimes you say, okay, I'm waiving this rule for this reason, but then you know what you're doing, which is a different thing from not knowing what you're doing. Speaking of which, there's another kind of comma which can be called the stitch in time comma, which is just put there to make sure you don't mess up. Like, the year before Srila Prabhupada had gone to Malaysia, that's the beginning of a sentence. If the before is meant to be introductory, you need a comma. Because otherwise I'm saying, the year before Srila Prabhupada had gone to Malaysia, he'd gone to France or something. So you need to know, these are like road signs, you need to know where you're going. And so here you need an extra road sign to make sure that I don't run into the wrong place. So wherever with time expressions or wherever needed to prevent tripping, outside the house looked bleak and sinister. Not outside the house looked bleak and sinister, which is equally possible, but not intended here. So that's a stitch in time comma, a comma that just, you need it so that your reader doesn't trip. Oh yeah. Things can get a little funny with because. He never went to Vrindavan because he was devoted to the deity. That is, his devotion to the deity kept him from going. Or he never went to Vrindavan because he was devoted to the deity. Means he went there because there was money or better weather or whatever it was. So there the comma makes a difference. It tells me what is actually happening. It's another kind of stitch in time comma. A because phrase without a comma speaks about why, with a comma speaks about why not. So you might want to recast the sentence instead of just depending on a comma. Instead of going to Vrindavan, he stayed back in America because he was devoted to the deity. Or however you might recast it, the other meaning. Clear?
Yes.
And one more comment, I think. clauses, beware of clauses that look both ways. Although they were overjoyed to see Gopal, because his father had died in a car accident in India, they were also saddened. So I'm not quite sure the relationship of these clauses. It's not hard to figure out, but I have to use logic to do it. This one maybe makes it clearer, makes the problem clearer. Although he was fully engaged in devotional service, realizing the value of serving his spiritual master, he went to Vrindavan. It's a Janus clause. It looks both ways. I don't know whether he was fully engaged in devotional service, realizing the value of serving, and therefore, despite that, he went to Vrindavan. Or although he was fully engaged in devotional service, realizing the value of serving his spiritual master, he went to Vrindavan.
That's
But it should be.
It could be either way. He was fully engaged in devotional service, realizing the value of serving the spiritual master, but he went to Vrindavan. The other one says, although fully engaged in devotional service, he was fully engaged in devotional service, but realizing the value of serving the spiritual master, he went to Vrindavan. So when you see a clause like that, which can look both ways, your reader doesn't know which way to look. So you need to do something. Either you could possibly omit a comma, like this second comma, if I omit, then I've got that second meaning clear. Although engaged in devotional service, realizing the value of serving a spiritual master, he went to Vrindavan. But if that wasn't my meaning, I need a different way to do it, which could be, probably would be, recasting the sentence. He was fully engaged in devotional service, but realizing the value of serving the spiritual. Okay? It's a simple principle. Try to avoid puzzling your reader or leaving him puzzled. Okay, semicolons, also called half stops. They're not commas, they're not periods. But they function more like periods or full stops. They indicate a closer relationship to two independent sentences or clauses than you'd have if they'd been divided by a full stop. They show a close relationship. He was foolish, semicolon. He left Vrindavan. You're indicating a close relationship. In this case, close relationship. If you could separate them with periods, but then they're a little farther away. He was foolish. He left Vrindavan. He went out, he caught the earliest train. But this way, you're indicating almost a causal, a very close relationship. Not causal, really, but he was foolish, he left Vrindavan. I won't go into it more. Strunk and White will give you more. Any good grammar book will give you more. They're not interchangeable. Semicolons and commas and periods are not, although semicolons and periods are closer to being interchangeable, but commas and semicolons are definitely not.
Serial commas and semicolons. Serial commas and semicolons.
Oh, that's a whole different thing.
That's different.
Where you use, in general, commas are commas and semicolons are semicolons. Where you may also use semicolons, and your grammar books again will tell you this, is where you have long and complicated series. You know, a list of 5 items, with sub-items included. Apples, which are my favorite fruit, pears, which I like less, grapes, which are hard to find, but hard to find and full of pesticides. And the modifiers start to get messy just with commas, so you divide them up. Apples, which I find delicious, semicolon, pears, comma, which are imported from France, semicolon. So it helps make sense of your sentence. Again, a good grammar book will help you out. Colons are abrupt stops. They show a relationship. Now here, this. They introduce lists. They indicate as follows. They're not interchangeable with semicolons. Again, your grammar book will help you. It's an abrupt kind of a stop, not to be used haphazardly. Then the dash. Alone, it works much like the colon. He gave the shocking news, colon. I'd lost and taken some notes. So you could use a dash or a colon there. In pairs, they set off parenthetical elements. Strong. And they shouldn't be overused because they're strong. The dash you want is what's called an M, as in Madhava dash, an M dash. It's the long dash. It's different from the hyphen, and it's even different from what's called an N, and as in Narayan dash, which is a shorter dash used for special purposes. You usually indicate a dash by 2 hyphens, or these days, Microsoft Word will automatically turn it into a dash.
It's a Unicode.
Whether or not you use intervening spaces, generally in typeset material you don't. There is an argument for using them. Robert Brinkhurst is the... Anyway, go to the BBT style guide you're talking about. We're doing pretty well, aren't we? There's in your set of handouts, there's a file called Small for Big. This is a file it originally actually came in with a particular program, and I just started expanding on it. Basically, it's just a text file too. It's a batch of long words. It originally started as a batch of long words, and I added other words that we frequently use with alternatives for you. So that if you'd like to use short words, if you're looking for a short word, you might find it. For example, activity, which is a word that we have a lot in this kind of here, activity. Could be act, work, action, deed, feat, step, affair, doings, goings on, in the plural. Workings, dealing, play, sport, fun, trick, escapade, tactic, measure, movements, way of acting, conduct, behavior, practice, task, job, duty, function, undertaking, engagement, effort, endeavor, enterprise, what one does, or event. Really, it's like a mini thesaurus here, but it singles out either long words or words we use a lot and offers alternatives. The list should not be used mechanically. The alternatives are not automatically better. But I find it a handy list because there are a lot of words we use a lot, And this makes, rather than going back to the source and looking it up again, here they are. So for example, additional could be added, extra, more. Additionally could be to also. We count not only words but syllables. I didn't tell you that before, but we do. Additionally, 5 syllables. Could be also 2 syllables for savings of 3, more than half. Adequate could be ample for a saving of 1, and for a switch from Latin to Saxon. Adhere could be stick. Again, going from double 2 syllables to 1, and from Latin to Saxon. Now, there's no rule that adhere is better than stick, or stick is better than adhere. It's just, if you want to, there's an alternative for you. Administer could be give or give out, or manage, or look after, or watch over. These all help you find alternatives to loan words, or alternatives to commonly used, so commonly, although monotonously used words, particularly in ISKCON. Looking for one that, like bifurcate. Bifurcate is quite an unusual word, which we use a lot in ISKCON because Prabhupada used it. But it could be split, split in 2, split in half. Business is another one that we use a lot because Prabhupada talks a lot about business of this and business of that. It could be task, job, work, duty, chore, concern, cares, aim, role, interest, habit, or business. Okay, so that's one of the resources in your package. Excuse me? You're welcome. Italics, yes?
Sorry, sir. I just
Don't be sorry,
wondered-
but use the microphone.
I was wondering, Maharaj, if we have any word to substitute circumambulate, or is that the only word that we can use?
Substitute for
Circumambulate.
circumambulate. Yeah. Walk around. Encircle. Encircle, walk around. Walk around is perfectly fine, you know. Walk in a circle around. Circumambulate is really walk, ambulate in a circle.
I think we just got used to it so much that anything
Yeah, we're used to
simple-
these words. We do have an ISKCON vocabulary. Apart from real jargon, we have things like circumambulate, and which are we just use them like anything. But if you think about the words, say, is there a clearer way to say this? Is there a plainer way? Is there a simpler way? Is there a different way to say this than circumambulate, for example?
It does give some power. The word circumambulate, it's a special meaning to it.
Yeah, it's like genuflect to your Christians.
Yes.
Which means this.
Right.
But you could also say get down on your knees.
Right. Get on.
But the Christians will normally, in ordinary discourse, how many of us talk about genuflecting? It's really it belongs, it's church language. It's church jargon, which is fine. It's really fine. All the church members will know about, genuflecting. It says in the prayer book, genuflect. But we might, just for the common person, want to say, get down on your knees. So, and this is, you'll find, in fact, another one of my gifts to you today is an article written by a Christian author. She's an author of articles. She sells articles to different Christian magazines. She's giving advice for other people who do that. And one of the things she says is watch out for jargon. For example, salvation. is typical Christian jargon, but your reader may not really have only the haziest idea of what salvation is.
It can be preachy.
The incarnation, speaking of, the appearance of Christ. There's lots of Christian jargon, or medical jargon, or Hare Krishna jargon. So one of the things you do to make your writing plainer and cleaner and more simpático, we say in Spanish, more congenial, is to examine your writing or your author's writing for jargon and say, do we want to use the jargon or do we want to use something else? There's some jargon, like some of it is really just for us, like temple room. Temple room. It's not unintelligible, but what exactly does it just mean? Really, like I went to Watsek Avenue and I went into the temple room. Everybody else went into the temple, but the devotees went into the temple room. And it's fine to have a temple room, Pujari room, and so on. Then it makes sense. If Pujari room is against the temple room is against this. But it's jargon that you want to not necessarily change, but at least examine. Anything else here?
I think that what I'm getting from this is that to just be inclusive rather than just,
You don't have to be inclusive. If you're writing for a specialist audience, you can be as exclusive as you want. If I'm writing an article for biblical scholars, it's fine for me to talk about, also typography and hagiography and all these typographies, use their language to show that I'm a member of the fraternity and, keep them happy and also to telegraph ideas, to make sure we're saying the same thing to one another. That's what jargon's for, among other things.
Just to be
Jargon shows you're a member of the club,
Wow.
and jargon also gets across ideas in a fast way because we've agreed on this language that means a particular thing to us.
Just to be aware of our audience.
Yeah.
That
You like to spike an article
spike
is clear for editors. It means to put it on the spike, or basically a needle sticking up. You stick it on the spike, which says, "Forget it. I've spiked this one." So every trade, every profession. So, and when you're writing for those people, it shows that you're one of them, and it gets across the ideas fast. But it's when we're writing for outsiders, or for a mixed audience, that you want to say, is everyone here going to understand me? Even if I'm talking about participial phrases and restrictive modifiers and so on, or even parts of speech, is everybody with me? So it's a kind of grammar jargon which not everyone knows. So then we have to say, well, an adjective is a modifying word, it's a word that tells something about a noun. That's what we mean. And a grade school teacher might find a cute equivalent for it, and so on. But yes, when we're talking to mixed audiences and so on, going after jargon is a helpful, very helpful strategy. Having what would you say, a jargon detector installed. Italics are used to set aside, are used for emphasis. Do it now. They're used for book titles. They're used for various newspapers, I think.
unusual words.
They're used for foreign words. And the general rule is you use it in italics the first time, and then after that, you're free to dispense with the italics. ISKCON BBT style is we use them consistently, because when was the first time this word was introduced? You know, where?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
Now, again, if you look in the BBT handbook, you'll see our evolving thinking about italics. But these are some of the uses. There are several uses of italics. Sometimes italics are used, they're versions of the Bible where they use italics to indicate words that are not in the original Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic, but are supplied by the translator. Not Yahweh, but these simple words, any word, but it's just not in the original language, but it's been added for clarity in English. So to indicate that it's not part of the original, they'll put it in italic. That's another use of italics. You can do all sorts of things. That does create problems sometimes. This one was pointed out by Howard, I think. What can happen with supplying italics to indicate it wasn't in the original. This is 1 Kings 13:27. And he spake to his sons, saying, saddle me the ass. And they saddled him.
The he ass.
Sequence of tenses is something you want to pay attention to. There's past and past of the past, so that needs attention, and so on. You need to make sure you have them right. Past, past of the past. He went, he had gone, so. Watch out for mixed metaphors. Someone coined the name mixaphor for these things. Mixed metaphors, as in hope for a resumption of Arab-Israeli negotiations is hanging on the slimmest of threads. But two developments of recent days flash the signal that the door remains at least ajar for the kind of diplomatic footwork that can forestall the outbreak of war. Someone observed yesterday how neat it was that Tom Wolfe had kept that one metaphor extending throughout his entire 622 word or whatever it was sentence. But here you've got a short sentence, and he's got hanging on the thread, flashing a signal, leaving a door ajar, doing fancy footwork, and all in one sentence. So it's a sort of dullness to metaphor. The metaphors have gone dead, and he's using them just as words, as phrases, unconscious to the metaphorical sense of it. So if you're going to use metaphor, prefer a live metaphor and use it purposefully, and don't mix one metaphor with another metaphor. Otherwise, you may start off on the wrong foot and go out of orbit. You'll want to learn the difference between like and as. I won't go into it here, but you need to learn it. Like and as. Like governs nouns and pronouns. He shot up like a comet. He fell like a stone. So like governs nouns and pronouns. But before phrases and clauses, you want as. Because things should be as they should be. That's the general rule. I hope you know about unique. Unique. What does unique mean?
Singular is like something.
What does unique mean?
Something special.
Something special.
Nothing else.
Not put, yes, true, but not precise enough a definition.
There's nothing else.
True that something unique is special. How is it special?
It's different.
It's different.
The early instance of a class. The early instance of a class. It's like the only instance of a class.
The only instances of a class, that is to say, one of a kind. If something is unique, it's one of a kind. So that's an absolute. We were talking about absolutes. If something is unique, it's one of a kind. And we hear unique being used as special. It was a unique experience. How unique was it? It was like so many other experiences, but it was cool. Or we find more unique, or very unique.
Most.
That's like very dead. You know, either you are or you're not. Which reminds me, Janardar Maharaj told me he was driving one day someplace in New York City or something, and he sort of lost track of where he was. And saw a policeman, he said, "Officer, I think I'm lost." So this was a New York cop. He said, "Listen, you're either lost or you're not. Which is it?"
They're like that.
So unique means one of a kind, often misused just to mean special, and be careful.
So you should just say the word special, not unique.
Yeah, if you mean special, say special. Nothing wrong with it. There's no most unique. The difference between anyone, one word, and two words, any one instance
Anyone can tell.
of butter stealing, any one instance, but anyone stealing butter, one word. All right, this is an easy one, but deserves to be said. All right. That's the green. Ooh. This all right is not all right. What you want is it's either all right, two words, or it's always two words, isn't it?
It's 2 words unless you're responding to someone, all right. If you're responding to someone, like, yes, like in the affirmative, you can say the first one, all right.
No.
No?
Let's get it all right here. Even I'm confused. I never use, there's no such thing as A-L-R-I-G-H-T.
Let's check our dictionary.
Let's get it right here. Yeah. It's two words always. It's two words always. Except as an adjective, satisfactory. As in,
Right. Yeah.
we had an all right time
Mm-hmm.
in Vrindavan. It means so-so. But otherwise, if things are all right, They're like that. 2 words, not 1 word, and certainly not 1 L. It's just a sign of carelessness or innocence, shall we say, that we see this all right commonly written. But in edited, well-edited prose, we should never see it.
2 words.
Copyright is 1 word, not 2. Writing for the web. Some of our students said that's what they do. The web is different. You probably noticed that. Let's see. People do not read web pages. Yes. They scan them. So if you're in the world of the web, you're in a different world. Communication goes on in a different way. If you're writing a book, an essay, that sort of thing, you're in one world. But if you're writing for the web, things work differently. People are scanning, they're looking for the particular information they're looking for. Even if they want to read something, they read differently. They want to get to the things they want and move on. So on the web, you use devices that help, that fit that mode, that help people scan. You make liberal use of headlines. Lists. Subheads. Subheadings, photos, captions, because captions are often a fast way to get across exactly the information I want. Give me a photo and a caption. Of course, tables and charts and graphics of various kinds. Bullet points. Bullet points, numbered items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Infographics.
Yeah, infographics, various kinds of information.
It's more concise.
Ample use of bold, all that kind of stuff. Anything that will help me scan the page and find the information I want. I don't really want to read all the stuff you want to say. I just want to get to the essence of it. So help me out, get me to this place, this place, this place, and this place. Part of it is cutting. If you're cutting in your articles and your essays, cut more to the web. Cut. If it's not essential, dump it, ditch it. Get rid of everything that doesn't help me as a user, get to the information I want, and get there quickly and in an organized fashion. First thing is before I even start scanning much through your page, I scan it to see if what I want is here. If it's not here, I'm gone. Just like that, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. Is it here? If you have a headline that says it's here, and then something, shows me, well, anyway, I can give you, we won't get into it much. But that's what you're looking for on the way. I'm looking for resources, I'm looking for specific information, and I'm scanning. And maybe, find this here, but I'm not there, that's fine. We won't talk about information architecture and how deep you go and all of that, but just you're in a different world with the web. Any questions about that?
Is there any difference between anyone and anybody? How to use it?
Is there any difference? Yes. Anybody and anyone are synonymous. Anybody or anyone are fine. I agree though, in fact, which routinely in Prabhupada's books substitute anyone for anybody. The reason being that it's a little more formal.
Anybody?
Anyone. A little more formal. And anybody is a little more, not colloquial, but just a notch down. Anybody can understand. It's perfectly good English, perfectly acceptable in any context, but a little more folksy, just a little notch more folksy than anyone, which is slightly more formal. It's just a shade. The meaning is the same, and they're both acceptable.
Which one do you use, Maharaj?
Excuse me?
Which one do you use?
I generally use anyone, but if I want to be folksy or if I want to be just plain folks, then I'd say anybody can understand it. That's then anybody. But informal or my usual, I think because I was indoctrinated by this, I generally go for anyone. But anybody also works. Any other questions here? Okay. I mentioned yesterday elegant variation, where one word can't be used too many times. You have to have synonyms. I just happen to have an example here. Someone coined the word monologophobia. Fear of using the same word again and again. So they write, as the tiger entered the village, people everywhere ran in fear of the predator, terrified of the great cat. As the feline prowler roamed about, 5 different ways to say tiger. All unnecessary. Tiger, 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 tiger. Burning breath. Don't join independent clauses with the comma. Going back to our commas. The kirtan went on for 6 hours. Everyone just wanted to keep going. There's got to be a full stop there. 2 independent clauses. And you can't just splice them. This is called a comma splice. You can't just splice them by sticking them together with commas. Of course you can do anything, but one doesn't. Krishnadas dressed the deities today, therefore the curtains open late. And or just a full stop. He was told to end the kirtan early. Besides, he had a plate of Mahaprasadam waiting for him. Again, one full stop. There are exceptions. I came, I saw, I conquered. But in general, this is the rule. Places to look for trouble. Important for editors, proofreaders, publishers. The principle is what goes in last is most likely to get screwed up. So, covers. Is everything spelled right? Is everything in the right position? Is everything there that should be there? Is there anything there that shouldn't? You would be surprised how many times people can look at a cover and just not see it. We have a legal case that's been pending, and we poured over this legal case again and again, the papers that we submitted, just this argument and that argument, this point, this fact, that fact, the spelling of this name, that name, and nobody noticed that we said International Society of Krishna Consciousness versus instead of for.
Oh, yeah.
International Society of Krishna Consciousness versus. So that's how it is now in the law books for that case.
Well, in that case.
Yeah, not for every case, but for that one. But it was just oversight because it was such an obvious. It's just your eye skips over it. That's just the title. Let's get down to the guts of it. So I'm sure 50 or 100, 200 times we looked at those documents, more, several of us, and several devotees, and nobody said, wait a second, that's International Society for. So these things hide out. So covers, spines, you know what the spine is?
The binding?
Yeah. Spine is another chance to show me books.
Okay.
This is the spine. The part that sticks out when you put the book this way. That's your spine. Again, is everything there? Is it all positioned right? Is it spelled right? Things can go wrong there. Then your title pages. What's called your half title page, which is this one. And your full title page, which is that one. Does it have everything it needs? Is it spelled right? Because your designer gets in there, this person gets in there, that person gets in there, and things change. You would be amazed how they change. Without your having noticed, without it being put past you. So you have to check your title pages, your copyright page. Is the copyright notice correct? Is it there, first of all? And is it correct? Is the year right? Is your ISBN number correct? The cataloging number? Is your Library of Congress or British Library number there? Is all the stuff right? Your contents page. Do the page numbers and titles match? The Vyas Puja book, Prabhupada tribute book that we published this year, had wrong page numbers for a certain number of entries, which created a lot of trouble. I went to look for somebody's offering, and it wasn't on the page it said it was on. Because people had, things had shifted, and nobody at the end had checked the page numbers. It's tedious.
Yeah.
Page number, yeah. Page number, yeah. Page number, yeah. Page number, yeah. Who wants to do all that? But if you don't do it, this can happen. So you have to check your page numbers. You have to check the titles. Did the title change in the process of production someplace along the line? Now you've got the right page number and a title that's almost right. All the front matter, the pages we just talked about, plus the preface, the introduction, anything that's up front, the endorsements if you have them, check, 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 because all this stuff can move around at the last minute. You can go through the last minute, oh, let's put this one in, let's put that one in for endorsements, etc. And page numbers, flip around. All your front matter, all your back matter, your indexes, your what have you, references. Check all of them. your chapter title pages, any last minute stuff, and your page numbers and running heads. You know what running heads are? Usually the running heads, right and left. They can sometimes appear as running feet, footers instead of headers, but generally they're up at the top. Something like a book title or a chapter title. There are different ways of doing it. Have you follow the same? You know, if I'm putting like on the left-hand page, book name, and on the right hand page, chapter name in chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, putting the chapter title on both pages, or the book title on both pages, or some other variation. There are different ways that you can do these things. Am I being consistent? Do I have the right chapter title and the right chapter on all the running heads? Because, you know, this is just stuff that the layout man is pasting in. And, you know, Control V in the wrong time, and then you've got the wrong header. Are my page numbers correct? Sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4. They can go wrong. And in the introduction, if I'm, or the front matter, if I'm using Roman numerals, they can go still more wrong. So all this kind of small stuff, which is really big stuff because it stands out, page numbers, for crying out loud, are really an integral part of the book. Titles, covers, back covers, where there's, you know, a fair amount of stuff, all working with the designer to get the things in the right places, and he moves this about, moves that about, and is the layout still right? Do things still flow together? This was meant to be a caption, is it still a caption? Subheads throughout the book. I have one place in the American edition of this book, there's an American printing and a South African print. American edition, I have a one-word paragraph, I have a one-word paragraph which the designer turned into a subhead. And I marked it, but somehow or other it's still that way. Although in the South African one we got it right. So this business of subheads, you know, headings, subheads, all these kind of structural parts, things can go wrong. And so you have to check and check and check and check. You have to check your cover 100 times, your spine's 75, your title page is 152. I mean, you really have to check and check and check all of this stuff, because it's amazing how errors can creep in. This is one of the 4 defects of the conditioned soul, and they're manifest in publications generally, not just books, but, you know, captions. Is this the caption that goes with this illustration? If it's illustration number 4, is it really number 4, or is it the second number 4? Or did I go from 3 to 7? Or from 4 to 3? You know, these things move around. And you're not all, especially these days where we're working with InDesign and all of that, you're not really seeing the whole publication in front of you. You're seeing a spread. So you're moving things around, but when you did X, you're not quite sure, perhaps, or you don't realize that it affected Y. Because you're not looking at Y, it's not in front of you. All you get to see is a screen full at a time. Hence, careful scrutiny at every stage. Yes?
Some authors, they like to have 3 chapters starting from the right page.
Yes, there are conventions about this. The general convention is to start chapters on the right side. You can start chapters, if you want, right in the middle of the page, right or left. If you don't, if you're like squashed for space, or you don't, for one reason or another, you don't want to have chapter, you go chapter 1, chapter 2. But that tends to signal that something's not quite right, that something's amiss here, that perhaps it shouldn't have been like that, or that this is a chintzy publication. The usual standard is for chapters to end on the right. Alternatively, they can begin on the left. If I'm designing in spreads, a spread is a set of 2 pages. If I'm designing in spreads, I may start each chapter with a spread, in which the entire spread is essentially the chapter intro, or the chapter page, chapter title page. I don't design it as a single page, I design it as a double page. And so that double page spread becomes the opening of my chapter. In that case, I'm beginning, you could say on the left, although really I'm beginning, on the whole 2 pages. I can do it like that, and that can be very impressive, especially in an art book or something of that nature. Maybe a cooking book, some what they call a coffee table book.
Very large picture.
Yes, things with large format. You can design that way, and it can be exceedingly fine. So there's no rule that it must be on the right-hand page. You can break all the rules if you want. You can start from the right-hand side of the, from the last page of the book and work backwards if you've got a good reason to do it. Hard to think of one, but if you did, you could. Maybe you want to emulate Hebrew or something.
Yeah.
Hebrew and Arabic. But I'm being extreme, but you can break rules. There's a lot about design. One book that I can recommend, just since you brought it up, for those who are getting into not just editing, but the larger process of book production and book design, is a book called Bookmaking by Marshall Lee. It was a book we first used in the early 1970s at BBT, and it's since been updated. I think the latest update is already a little outdated in terms of technology and that sort of thing, but it's still an excellent guide to the entire process of book design and book production, including some stuff about editing, which is valuable also. Just for example, headlines. That could be a headline, but it's not just a very pleasingly designed headline. You've got this long stick protruding over this little what would you say, little short piece of land here. I might be better off with this, especially if I did it this way. That starts to look better. Or I can do that. That starts to look a lot better. I definitely wouldn't want to do this. I don't think I would. Because the of more naturally goes with Krishna. Transcendental pastimes of Krishna is enough. These are design considerations, but they're good for editors to know, because it's part of how we communicate in words, the way we shape these things. You wouldn't do something like this, for example. Well, you could. Yeah, you would. You wouldn't do the transcendental pastimes of, right? This is, you want to break according to sense. You want to break according to sense. That you could do if you want. I find it aesthetically a little unattractive because you've got all that weight up top. But at least it breaks according to sense. While you're at it, since we're going a little bit beyond words here, there's some other pet peeves. You know what dropouts are? And dropouts and overprints. Dropouts are where you see, dropped out type is basically type in white. Where you've got a background, say blue or a picture or solid color of some sort, and you drop out the type means it's white. Although you could also drop it out in pink or something like that. But basically, you're dropping out or erasing the background. And so you've got, like, for example, white on black or white on blue or white on something or pale blue on pale blue on dark blue, for example. That's dropped out type. Designers love dropped out type. They thrive on dropped out type. It's like samosas and rasgullas and bel pudding for designers. And dropped out type can be very effective. It's most effective when it's large, you know, a large dropped out word, or 2 words or 3 words dropped down can really be strong. Large type, thick type, because dropping out thin little ascenders and descenders, as they call them. Thin little, some types are designed thick, and some have thicks and thins. The ones with thicks and thicks and thins, Bembo, for example, has very, very thin lines in contrast to thicker ones. They don't drop out as well. They don't drop out as well because, especially at a smaller size, the lines are thin to begin with. They don't pop out. So you're good with thick type, you're good with large type, you're good with few words. When you start going to the smaller sizes and more words, it gets hard to read. It's significantly harder to read dropped out type at any length than it is to read normal dark on light. And yet we see designers like starting an article with dropped out type, making it hard for me to even begin reading. So be careful about dropped out type. Be especially careful about dropping out type over uneven backgrounds, where the background is not homogeneous, but it's got little patterns or swirls or different colors. You know, you've got a black over here and a green over here, and you're dropping out over it. Because the eye is discerning the pattern of the A and the B and the C and the D. And you're interfering with that when you're putting something in the middle of it or something behind it. Or you're bringing about strange effects when you drop out over 2 colors. when you're dropping out, say over, let's say this is going to be a white on green, dark green, and this is going to be over dark blue, I'm going to see two words. Radha. And why? Unless I mean to say ha. I'm even dividing one Sanskrit letter, because really that's it. But, you know, why am I doing that? My eye is going to see two different things. So you want to be careful when you're messing around with these dropouts or overprints, which is the opposite, where you're printing over a color or over a design of some sort. In general, beware of anything behind your type. Because it's hard enough to make out those shapes at 8 point, 10 point, 12 point. And then you've got little things going on behind. It's making it harder because you have to do pattern recognition. That's what reading is. You have to do pattern recognition now on two different sets of patterns, or focus on one pattern while another pattern is going on behind you. Maybe if you're trying to get high on LSD and otherwise, I recommend it. Let's see. And also avoid, like, I've seen it too much lately, like this love of pale type. You know, a beautiful antique beige type on creamy paper. So that the contrast between the two is reduced to the most sublime minimum.
You can't even read it.
Yeah.
It should, our job is to make it clear.
Make it clear. So you want a good, strong contrast between your type and your page with as little interference as possible so that your reader can read. Unless you have some other purpose in mind. If you want to, if it's a geometric experiment or, you know, a design thing or whatever it is. But if you expect to be read, make it easy for you, as easy as possible. For text, avoid, for long text, you know what Helvetica is?
Yes.
Are we all familiar with Helvetica? Okay, so this is Helvetica. Basically, there are serif fonts and serifs. Serifs are the little doodads, if you will, at the end, at the bottoms and the tops of letters. And this is the same typeface actually. It's the serif version and the sans serif version. The sans serif version is more geometrical. It's really designed to be geometrical. No variation between thicks and thins. You could draw it with a protractor and a compass and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas serif faces have a more of a hand-tooled feel. They're both good. They both have their purposes. For long stretches of serious text, stick with sans serif. Serif is harder to read at length. For headlines, sans serif can be great, but for extended text, sans serif is really not the way to go. Unless you're doing a specialty book, like if you're doing a book about architecture, and you want to get across a very modern feel, you might want to go with sans serif. But for ordinary text, like the kind that we usually deal with, you're better off with sans.
Maharaj, all the recent DVD publications in India, we have it as sans serif.
Stop there. I have nothing to say about BBC publications in India. It's a different organization. I'm not involved. I have nothing to say. Okay. Are there any last-minute questions? Because time is just about ended. Yes.
Where should we go from here to increase our
Oh,
our
good.
skills?
There's two things. Where you can go from here to increase your skills and so on. There's a lot of, go to my book list. There's good stuff there. Practice, that helps a lot. There are university and online courses. I've never taken any. I can't say anything about them, except that they ought to teach you something and that they give you bad association. But you can't learn from them. There's seminars, there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's professional magazines, there are professional websites. But you reminded me of the other thing I wanted to talk about, which apart from writing, which we talked about elsewhere, where do you go with these editing skills? So you can use them in web work, you can use them for BBT, those who are going to get involved in one language or another with BBT. There's always a need for editors, always, always. You can use them for the many, many devotees who are looking for editors. They come to me often and say, do you know anyone who could edit my book? And I say, well, ask Kashore. Because she tends to be in touch with more editors than I've been in touch with. But there are a lot of books that devotees are producing that sorely need editing. Good books, valuable books, books with extremely good content that need editing. So you can help out other devotees with editing. There's your own stuff, which you can edit again and again and again. And what else am I missing? There's communication stuff. There's all the stuff produced by your publicity department, from the posters and the cards to the pamphlets to you name it. All need editing. There's even stuff like, what do they call them? Subtitles on Prabhupada's lectures and so on, that kind of thing that needs editing. The letters that you send out to your congregation, any other kind of communication that you send out to your congregation, editing can make a big difference in the feel of it, the intelligibility of it, the actionability of it, all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of scope. And you can just practice. Let me take a look at the poster. Maybe I can include it. Let me take a look at that card and make a suggestion there. Articles, all sorts of places. Lots and lots of ways for editing. Big need in ISKCON, big need in BBT, big need for other devotee authors publishing on their own or publishing elsewhere. For those who are interested in making money, there are employment out there. That's if this were that kind of seminar, and I have a whole handout about where you. We heard Prabhupada's lecture this morning. He said, "Whatever you're destined to get, that's what you'll get." So, no advice about making money today. If there's anything else I want you to leave with, we are just about done. Your files that you're eagerly seeking out, I'll give. Who should I give? Will I give you the final version, and you can give it out to everyone? So that, and I'll tell you what's in it, so you get a sense of all the lovely stuff that you're going to get for no extra charge. Listen to that. You're going to get some MS Word macros that do different stuff. You'll get some writing samples of some good carbon letters who've done this good stuff. You'll get the BBT style guide. You'll get a few extra goodies that I didn't have time for today, little text files and so on. You'll get my book list, a list of cliches. You'll get the whole presentation that you've seen up here. You'll get get the small for big file. And yeah, there's a few more fun things that I've thrown in for you to enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Maybe so may your editorial eye become ever more keen, and may you use it well in Krishna's service. Thank you.